And for me, this started with holding compassion for the boy within that was crying out for a hug, and not from anyone else, but from himself. Hey everyone, Lev here. I am your host for Level Up with Lev, which is a show where I share my journey of personal growth and development. So this week we're continuing with the second topic in the background work initial approach mini-season, which includes character traits and attributes that I had to learn, work on, and embody in order to become a better version of myself. So today I will discuss the long road it's been to accept myself. And don't worry, I'll keep it brief. And while I won't be diving into very many specific details, I don't think I need to in order to convey what it's like to have done things in your past that you aren't proud of. And so while I am human, this has happened to me as well. The issue though is that I wasn't able to let go of the guilt that I felt for a number of years. So in this episode, I hope to provide a brief overview of some of the things that were transformative and crucial for me to learn and embody in order to create a healthier relationship within myself. So in a word, anger was the vice of my younger self. This was largely due to previously unresolved issues and my inability to understand, work on, and work through some of my issues. Now, the answer involved understanding my emotions, learning how to process them, and understanding my previous story, all in healthier forms, which I've learned how to do as I've gotten older. So if you don't relate, that's totally fine. Feel free to skip this episode and just tune back in next week. However, I do think that these concepts are generally helpful for anybody to hear because you might be able to understand others better who might have gone through or are going through some of the similar struggles that I did, or it may help you to understand future situations. And I say that because part of what I didn't receive prior on my quest of improving myself and becoming a better version of myself before I learned to embody these 4 concepts were practical, actionable ways to improve myself that actually resonated with me and my story. So hopefully this episode will shed some light on some strategies and techniques that will for someone else out there. So today's episode will follow the following structure. I'll relate to the previous episode on truth, and then I'll dive into the 4 different concepts that helped me along my journey, including compassion, understanding, forgiveness, and vulnerability. And by the way, those 4 concepts were all directed towards myself and all contributed to the ultimate goal of accepting Lev for Lev. So let's get right to it. Now, when I said the truth set me free in a previous episode, that wasn't the full truth, as I'm sure you can imagine. The truth was a necessary precursor because it enabled me to see what I needed to see through an unfiltered lens. However, it didn't provide the necessary change in and of itself. For me to shift the way that I viewed myself, I needed to cross a bridge. Now, the reason for this was because I didn't want to see the truth. The truth is what I was trying to run from, so why would I want to see it? I hurt people I loved in my past in ways that I'll never be able to take back, through my words and through my behaviors. Now, this manifested in unhealthy coping mechanisms, all of which just hid a person in pain. The truth that I held inside was that I viewed myself as a bad person, perhaps, for the things that I said and did. So to take the next step of being a functional adult, I needed to shift the way that I viewed myself. And this didn't involve lying to myself. No, this involved making space to accept myself. Accepting the fact that I made some mistakes in my life. Accepting that there were traceable events in my life, perhaps, that contributed to the way I used to be. Providing myself with the same level of compassion, understanding, and forgiveness that I offer to others so that I could create a safe space within myself. Now, these 3 main pieces led to the creation of healthy internal vulnerability that was necessary to heal and move forward in my life. This self-vulnerability has become a cornerstone of who I am because I'm able to be transparent with myself in a way that I never have been before. I treat myself as my own best friend and have fostered one of the greatest relationships that I have now with myself. Self-compassion. For a while, I would tend to look back at my issues or feel the emotions that stirred whenever I thought about those issues and write it off. Now, I used to think back in the past that either I deserved to feel the pain that I felt because of the way that I might have hurt others in the past, or I would try to escape or numb the pain through one mechanism or another. Now, in my life, those were both maladaptive practices when it came to dealing with my issues and prior experiences. And it wasn't until I came across the material of Dr. Gabor Mate that my eyes were truly opened. So I came across his material through a YouTube ad recommendation. And I'll share a recommendation with you all if you're interested in hearing his material. There's a 20 to 30 minute interview through Banyan Books and Sound called Dr. Gabor Mate - Compassionate Inquiry. And basically his work spans the understanding between the mind and body over time. I've explored his material on ADHD ADHD, the relationship between stress and disease, understanding trauma and addiction, the importance of parents' roles in their kids' lives, and the impact of early childhood experiences on future behaviors and actions. And it's all been really insightful material. And so as it relates to self-compassion, Dr. Gabor Mate's material helped me to humanize my pain and to see the person behind the maladaptive thought processes and behaviors as exactly that, a person. And for me, this started with holding compassion for the boy within that was crying out for a hug, and not from anyone else, but from himself. He just needed a hug from the most important person in his life who tended to keep him hidden away and locked in a room to be forgotten. But I couldn't continue keeping him locked away in that room and expect to become a functional, thriving, whole person. And this involved looking in the mirror, both metaphorically and literally. Self-understanding. I had to sit with myself and be able to look at the man in the mirror in order to unravel the maladaptive thought processes like, I don't deserve good things because I'm a bad person, in addition to the behaviors that I engaged in order to mask the pain, before I could become better. In order to be able to look at him, I had to understand him. I had to understand his pain in a way that I never thought was possible. I had to see him as a human who had human experiences in his life that hurt him, and hurt people hurt people. Now, this was a fact of life that I tended to understand when it came to others, but not for myself. And part of that was because it felt almost like cheating. Like, yeah, sure, forgive yourself, and everything will be fine and dandy, as if you didn't cause others to hurt. And of course, that wasn't a sustainable perspective. But this was the way that I felt for years, and nothing could really change my mind, except understanding myself. Understanding that events in life can affect a person's future behavior unless they recognize and rectify it through intentional work. Understanding that the boy within was in pain, and he just needed a hug from the person that mattered the most, himself. And once I really understood this, there was no accepting unacceptable behavior in the future, not while I'm in the driver's seat. Self-forgiveness. Now, the hug that I provided to the boy within was a natural response that often follows deep understanding. I felt like I understood him for the first time, and I allowed myself to feel his pain, to empathize with it. I saw him as he was, a hurt person who had hurt others, but a person nonetheless. Now, we all make mistakes. The most important thing is that we learn from them and don't repeat them in the future. He was genuinely remorseful. He had learned from his actions and made a vow to never hurt people the way he had done in his past ever again. So why would this boy not be deserving of empathetic understanding and love, just as anybody else would receive from me? We cried together, and I promised him that, though it would be painful, I would welcome him with open arms. No longer would he be relegated to the basement of my inner house. And this one was the toughest bottleneck for me in making true transformative change and progress in my life. Self-vulnerability. Now, the aforementioned compassion, understanding, and forgiveness all led to something much greater. They led to me seeing myself in a new light, and thus to a new relationship forged with myself. I learned to create a safe place within myself. Due to the newfound forgiveness and integration of pieces within myself that I didn't like, I've become more whole. I've become much more vulnerable with myself. I now have conversations with myself as if I'm my own best friend. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm always happy-go-lucky and supportive, which you'll see in the next episode, but it does mean that I can trust myself to be honest with myself about whatever's going on in my life. And this is the single most important human relationship that I have, the one with myself. Everything else adds to and is a reflection of it. But the way that we feel and operate from within is the most important thing in this life. After all, life is experienced from a first-person perspective. What we experience is all we've got, and the person you spend the most time with is yourself. Now, you don't have to be best friends with yourself, but from personal experience, I can say that I benefited greatly from moving from a negative personal relationship to a positive one, and at least a neutral one will serve you better than a negative one. Now, later in this show, we'll discuss the concept of the rings of influence, whereas there are multiple rings of influence that we have. There's a dot in the center, that's you, there's your inner circle, and an outer circle of external influences. And the closer to the center you get, the more influence these sources have on who we are, who we become, and what we're able to achieve in life. Crucially, You are the center of those concentric circles. You have the greatest influence on yourself. Now just imagine what you could do if you supported yourself and your endeavors, as opposed to getting in your own way due to limiting beliefs or believing that you aren't worth the effort required to grow and to change. So for me, this is the main piece of the foundation for self-improvement, the relationship with the self. The better the relationship is, the more progress we can expect to make. So if you're struggling with your relationship with yourself, as I've recommended before and I'll recommend again, check out some resources, talk to trusted individuals, and seek professional help if that's something that you need. It's that important in your life. It's your life. Your internal is the fundamental basis for everything that you experience. And if you want your experience to get better, it has to start from within. So that wraps up episode 4 of Level Up with Lev, where I discussed how I learned how to accept Lev for Lev. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please give it a like, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback. Reach out to me on any of the social media channels like Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. You can find me on all those places. I'd love to hear from you, and I hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you in next week's episode.